but it was sealed.
No, I repackaged it this morning.
They tore the. Oh, that's open.
If it was sealed, then it's quite mysterious.
Look, just then I was looking for the year.
I think this is 2018.
Yep. So it's good or even important in your own practice to follow the stillness when it arises. I think with the language I used in the more or that little interlude of being active in the meditation, I think you could probably see the pattern of the three sources form in that. And also make the leap and perhaps integrate experientially the nested patterns in time, not just as a spiraling into the future, but inclusive of the past and what the implications of a perpetual now are. Eternal now is in both directions, of course, not a moving present moment, but a static, inclusive moment.
Just an observation I had of my own experience was, and I've experienced this before, this quality of, with my eyes closed, almost feeling like I'm seeing more out of one eye, even though my eyes are closed and I'm not looking, but just, well, I guess there's the witnessing, but feeling kind of like a sidedness in my perception of being in my body. I also noticed that I was very much in, like I felt super still and comfortable. And I felt that the quality like was just so still. And then when I heard some movement, there was like a disruption to that felt like I maybe recognized in that moment that I wasn't as still, because there was like it felt like a disruption, like I didn't want it. Like, as well as when there's like when the bell chimes, and I feel like I've noticed this consistently through the practices of coming, is that there's a part of me that's still able to be startled by that, as opposed to a neutral witnessing of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that your approach to observing your experience in those ways, and I think the implied sort of non-judgmental self-criticism is both accurate and important to bring that relationship to experience in practice, so that we recognize the deeper stillnesses when they are available, and the stillness that can't be disturbed. So that's great. It's helpful. Thanks for sharing.
Alchemical texts referring to part of the process and saying that, I can't remember who the teacher is, but he was startled in the middle of the night by the thunder, and so he went back again over what it was he thought he had practiced previously, so that he wouldn't be startled by the thunder. I thought that he wouldn't be, but the fact that that's like recorded as part of his process.
Yeah. Yeah, it's good.
You know, I've heard a story of comparison of two different types of meditators, and one where there's like a loud sound and they're being monitored, and there's a sharp response to that, but then it just goes back to neutral, and then the other person, there's no response. And I forget what their different practices are. But, that's what it brings to mind.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think the main two that have been tested or that participated in those tests were Tibetan Buddhist practices, of which there are several, but and either a what's it called?
Transcendental?
Yeah, transcendental, kind of, which is a internal silent mantra repetition for stilling the mind, which is likely the one that was more responsive, but.
Inverted breathing.
Sure.
In the Wang Mu text on Foundations of Internal Alchemy, he talks about not being sort of central to the circulation back and down the front. And he talks about that in more detail, but I think he essentially says if you're not doing that, then you're not doing alchemical practice. And he very basically describes it as the inverse of your natural breathing in terms of on the inhale you would actually empty your belly rather than fill it, and vice versa. And I was sort of curious. I mean, he seems very, not necessarily prescriptive, but very sort of unwavering in the methodological aspects. So I was curious about sort of inverted breathing and about forcefulness and compelling things to happen rather than allowing breathing to take its own form.
Sure. Yeah, it's a his perspective is a narrow one in that regard. And so even in the sort of waves after this practice, if you want, we can all right now do a little inverted breathing just to demonstrate the principle. And so postural integrity is particularly important, so you don't cause kinks rather than. So press in the sit bones, lift up through the spine, lift from the jade pillow, lift the perineum, touch the upper bagpipe bridge, the tongue to the roof of the mouth. Now, when you can use your hands to help your body understand, if you hold them together either in Tai Chi or just, let's just say left on top of right, so the left hand is outward. Now the next exhale, allow your belly to relax. You're not expanding your belly, but allow your belly to relax. And as you inhale, draw your navel toward your spine and your perineum up, keeping the pressure in the lower belly. And then release and relax. The belly opens. And inhale and draw your navel toward your spine and lift the lower belly and perineum. Let the hands come out. Don't have to do the hands. It helps you feel what's happening in your belly. And now this time, instead of keeping your mind and your energy in your lower belly, allow it to come up the spine as you inhale. And draw in the belly. Lift the perineum. You should feel it culminate at the crown and perhaps around to the brow. Then exhale, relax the belly and feel the energy rain down the front. Continue with that. Now let the hands be, sustain, continue with the inverted breath, but with gentleness. Continue to feel the energy come up the spine and down the front. Inhale up, exhale down. drawing the belly in, but gentle and steady. Return to natural breathing. Resting in the natural breath. Extending, opening the spine. Just notice on the inhale, the rise, on the exhale, the fall. So it can be a useful technique to assist the yawn rising in the ocean. The initial part of this form serves the same purpose. It's easy to make a mistake with that pressurized breath. But also your body will sort it out, not too much. So, his emphasis there, Wang Mu's emphasis there is on a particular kind of body stage, it's Qi also, but Jing essence restoration and the initial transformation into Qi. The intent is to generate enough heat that cycle cycles on its own. Really the cycle is cycling on its own anyway, but as you put more water and steam in, as you restore your Jing, your essence, vitality, through stability and stillness, mind and body, that those rivers will course on their own. It's not wrong and bad, but it's narrow. It's a good tool. So if you compare your experience just now with the experience in today's meditation, You can, I'm interested in hearing also, but in any case, you can use the tool of inverted breathing if you're if you find it generates a lot of heat and sensation of cycling, results in ease as opposed to tension. But also the more advanced version of the yang rising in the ocean, the pressurized, the pressure after the home with the diaphragm coming down, perineum and lower belly lifting. That's even more effective. Partly because of the addition of the hold, brings more chi in to compress.
It was interesting to encounter that in the wine room after having been in Greece.
Tom, will you open up the shotgun mic so that we can hear?
Oh, yeah. And then also to have had such a still practice today that allowed for a lot of, for me anyway, for the breath to come forward, to manifest really prominently. When I was in Greece, I was doing a lot of free diving.
Mm-hmm.
And I noticed that it was generating a lot of heat, in particular because the water was fairly cold. And that seemed to take that form of inverted breathing naturally. And that at the end of...
Do you mean at a long breath hold you started to... You're...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that there was a similar sort of generation of sort of rising energy and then deep stillness afterwards, after surfacing and exhaling. And after about an hour and a half of doing this repeatedly, it was sort of state of deep stillness that would settle in
Yep.
for at least sort of several hours. Not a lot of bustle there to like dispel that.
Yep.
And then I read that reference in the Wine Moon and have sort of observed throughout doing the form since then that it's a very similar kind of energetic feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And that seems to be something that almost happens of its own during the practice of the form.
Mhm.
This form
Mhm.
feels not necessarily natural, but sort of comfortable and kind of in accordance with
Mhm.
what feels like the energy cycle.
Mhm. Yeah, I think when free diving like that, you have the additional support of the cold in the water, the extreme yin giving birth to yang, but even without that, just certainly for you, but for us anecdotally, the reminding us to push the breath hold in a comfortable but intentional way yields greater chi benefits. How many dives would you say you did in 90 minutes?
I didn't count. I prefer to be under the surface than on the surface, so as many as I could fit.
Yeah.
But I would say in terms of the kind of length of what felt comfortable being sort of in motion simultaneously was probably only about 30 seconds.
Mhm.
But the depth was enough that I realized at a certain point that it wasn't, it sort of shifted the focus away from the breath hold and onto the amount of pressure that
Mm.
I was feeling on my face. in
Sure.
particular.
Sure.
Which is as far as I went, push it through.
Yep. So it was relatively continuous in the sense that when you were ready, you went down again.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's aided by the fact
Great
that I
practice.
don't have prescriptive lenses in my mask, so I actually can't see anything from the surface.
There's something peaceful about that.
Yeah.
So the naming of the parts, as we have done with our attention to the branches, helps us see the detail more clearly. Like naming a tree or an insect, you see its differences, enjoy its role in the diversity of melody of being. And then the glasses off experience, where it's indistinct and vague. Supports our feeling of the entire processes, the entire cycle of transformation in a particular instant, as I attempted to guide you in the meditation today. That chipping away at that resistance we all have to really seeing the past and future as present, I think does a kind of outsized proportion of work in our minds toward making possible an integration and the understanding of the view, the unity, and the relationship of the singularity with the multiplicity. So I recommend revisiting that approach in your day or your meditation sometimes.
I noticed at a certain point during sitting that the feeling of kind of fidgetiness dropped off.
Mhm.
It all ended on me.
Sorry about that.
Good luck.
Yeah. Pigeon. Not that there wasn't sort of some discomfort or sort of sense of maybe feet falling asleep before that, but it kind of blurred a little bit and wasn't foremost in focus anymore.
Mhm.
And especially in my hands, but generally in my lower body, there was a very deep heaviness, feeling a little bit like in dreams or before falling asleep, where you don't recognize where your limbs are anymore.
Mhm.
Feeling sort of my hands were kind of like roots growing into one another. And I remember Ming,
Liu Yiming or Ming
no,
Liu?
Ming Liu,
Yeah.
saying in a talk once, or sort of distinguishing between trance-like states, in particular, sort of, he was saying if you're sitting with your eyes closed, it can tend towards the trance-like.
Mm.
And sort of curious whether sitting with that feeling of heaviness in the limbs and sort of seeing what that turns into is something that can be fruitful. Because my sort of instinct is to like twitch my fingers or my foot or something to
I see.
sort of remember where things are or
Right.
remind myself.
Yeah.
But it also feels extremely comfortable to just notice the kind of puddle-like indistinctness of the lower body.
So it depends a bit. If so, what he was referring to, and what can also be described as dullness and lack of awareness, lack of alertness, and that is to be avoided. But allowing your body to disappear to your mind is not trance or dullness. Things getting numb, it's just the body doing its thing, but it's the relationship to the mind that matters. And so, if the absence is like a being far away, then that's not trance. That's resting in the mother rather than the child. Whereas if it's obliviousness, kind of shutdown of like the closing of your mind's eye, that's to be avoided and should be instilled with alertness and awakeness. And we're susceptible to that, especially, I mean, you can recognize it as fatigue too. We're susceptible to that if we're underslept. And that feeling of like the mind having this weight, that's the part to be avoided. Or resolved. Primarily through sleep, not through slapping yourself in the face.
I think it's very interesting, just speaking about sleep or alertness, and just how I can experience a lot of shifts in energy and wakefulness, and just like the second wind at like late at night. And I just think it's kind of fascinating, or kind of toying with, not on purpose, but just at times having a very full life and maybe not sleeping much, but then at times either feeling that doesn't affect me, or other times feeling that lull and then a rise of energy out of it. And I've thought about this a lot in regards to that alertness that I could feel after not sleeping much, as well as like maybe even also coupled with waking up at a specific time that I want to wake up at without an alarm clock, and this connection to time that's like an unconscious, or maybe it's conscious, but it's like this trust in that. And then there's some like seed of energy in, maybe it's intention, that provides a wakefulness even when there's been a lack of sleep. To show up for the occasion of inspiration. I feel like it's an inspiration.
Yeah,
that's
what I
the
was gonna
energy
say.
there.
Yeah. So my experience is in those times, we see and feel the tangible energy and vitality, but we're draining the reserves. We're calling up that energy, or it's being called up, inspired. But rather than the reserves being full and the cup runneth over, it's drawing off those reserves to meet the demands you're making of yourself, that then those reserves need to be refilled later. It's all good, we all do it, but as a general approach, it's something to be careful of, I think, and to use sparingly and to be sure to restore sufficiently.
I'm wondering what the belief is around that reserve. I may have just had an introduction to the idea that Jing, it is like one is born with a certain amount of Jing, and then it's utilized and
Mhm.
used up
Mhm.
throughout one's lifetime.
Mm.
Is that how you've come to learn?
That's one of the orientations. And that's true and useful in a certain context, like the arc of a human life. You know, you use it up progressively until you die. And that's what the arc is. It includes the growth, and then the decline, and then the passing. On the other hand, in the mind and the body as a continuous spectrum with mind and spirit, that seed of bright space and stillness is perpetually generating vital essence. So you can see practice on the one hand as slowing the drainage in the limited Jing view, and that's supportive to nourishing and longevity. But you can also see it, you can see practicing as nourishing this yellow sprout of awareness of relationship to non-being, awakening, enlightenment, aware space, as perpetually generative. So they're both true. One is true of a strictly sort of physical health orientation, which is helpful for organizing our strategies for life. And the other is also true, where out of the original spark is infinitely generous. And you might, as a sort of visual corollary, of course non-literal, but available in literalness, the spark in the eye of a old person, of your 90-something-year-old family member, friend, that aliveness in spite of the physical decline is a kind of showing through of that spark. the way in which, to kind of connect it to Allie's questions and thoughts and experiences earlier, it's a way in which the rain is always falling, that Qi is always cycling, and that in practice what we're doing is gathering rather than spending. That perpetual flow of nourishment into us.
Yeah, in a more coarse way, that was sort of what became apparent with the free diving, which was this almost like the moments of surfacing and feeling the point in the breath and in the cycle at which that surfacing happened, and sometimes beyond the point of comfort, sometimes at what felt like exactly the cusp, and then feeling a sort of sense of catching that in its natural, almost like a natural peaks and troughs when submerging again.
Mhm.
It wasn't a sort of like manipulation of the way that the breath was moving, but
Mhm.
just a very unencumbered, without distractions, awareness of its own movement, without, in a situation where there was really no strain.
I'm curious what level of water you were in. Like when you came to the surface, did you have fins on your feet? Okay, and you were in deep water.
Yeah, probably like,
Waist deep, maybe.
yeah, my butt was out of the water and my head was down. Fins splashing around, people on the shore wondering.
That's all that kind of speaking right now.
I felt really accomplished though, getting down to the bottom. Probably like around 60 feet. Very clear water though, so that, I mean, that's, for me anyway, at this point, isn't diving still a very different relationship where when you can't see what you're diving towards, or you can't see your surroundings, you can see the bottom. But without weights, but with fins, it's definitely helping for me getting into that fluidity. Really.
It sounds so like such a beautiful experience of like not second guessing and just following that wave that is guiding the breath.
Yeah, it feels like that becomes almost central rather than kind of what you're diving towards, or along with the sort of feeling of the body in suspended movement in the water, which is also quite incredible. But then there are definitely those moments when you like see an octopus under a rock and you push really hard. And yeah, then you realize sort of like the moment of pressure on the face in the mask was a little warning about maybe not pushing the enthusiasm about a sense of like synchronicity with breath and with body too far. Becoming maybe a little bit more subtle in your awareness, but keep pushing.
Mm-hmm. I just think it's interesting because that practice pushes the edge of what our perception thinks is possible. And like if you were in a situation where you need to hold the breath a little longer than you think you can, and then you think you can, then you think you can, and how one might be able to do that because life depends on it.
Yeah, I've had that same feeling before in spring when we were doing with that form of a few moments when there was a sense of I'm running out of breath, this feels uncomfortable, and then something slightly shifting in a way that added like an extra margin or sort of amplified where there was some more breath somewhere or maybe coming in and where the awareness of whether I was inhaling or exhaling or like the familiar feeling of being like now I'm inhaling, now I'm exhaling dropped off and the line between the two became more blurred. I think that was associated also with moments when you sort of reminded in the midst of doing the form, and maybe you're focusing on what you're doing with your hands or on a sense of seasonality, sort of being reminded of a sense of breathing through one's pores or maintaining openness with the breath. Always sort of induced shifts like that.
I really enjoyed that added element of exploring the breath pores. And it's a new practice that I've had in the past year is this exploration of sound throughout the body, not just in the eardrums, but how vibration and the quality of the sound can be felt elsewhere, perceived elsewhere.
Yeah, it kind of fills out your awareness into. It's helpful in taking you out of here and being everywhere. That's a specific traditional technique, just so you all have it in your vocabulary. It's can be called skin breathing sometimes. Full body breath. It also helps you get toward the feeling of the Dantian breath, because your oxygen breath feels like it's expanding and contracting centrally rather than the lungs expanding and contracting. And then that center is can be centered anywhere here, but depending where you're focused. That can lead to having access to the experience of the Dantian breath. it also facilitates kind of self-correction of posture. Feel what's not breathing.
The sense when you were, I think it was around when you were saying the central channel filling, or the sense the breath is sort of coming up and going down, that the sense of center is a sort of imagined axis,
Mhm.
But it usually is one of the three, but this feeling of it being verticality while you're sitting upright.
Mhm.
It's felt different.
Yeah, so that is center with location, just as far as identifier terminology, clearly. So that kind of guidance is related by analogy to the center without location, but is not that thing. Does that make sense? Okay.
It's still a deep centrality in the body, in kind of embodied center as opposed to center without location.
It's just useful to, so yes, so it's useful to not conflate the ideas.
Yeah.
It's not to say you were, but just since you brought it up, to clarify that centrality we're working with is in the body, in the chi body, whereas when we're letting go of white and green in order to rest in the center without location, that is a center that is simultaneously everywhere, and that because it's everywhere equally is center, and that it's within that understanding that we're engaging in this narrative arc of working with centrality in our body and chi experience.
Is the bodily center you're referring to there has a quality of tending towards stilling and tending towards this settling of timelessness, but it, again, isn't that timelessness. To the degree that that's still animate and part of your, it's maybe a deeper level or a deeper subtlety, but the timelessness that you're referring to is this neither white nor green center.
So
That was one of my questions, but I think I didn't have the words before.
through the center, through being centered and through being center, the center without location can be recognized because we're not here, or here, but we're here, and so. So our balancing and harmonizing and reversion toward center is toward that center, that location. It is toward the root, the hub of the wheel. But we want to be careful in the organization of our words and minds not to over literalize that center.
Could you speak to just in thinking of green and white, the green tiger and the white mountain, qualities or concepts that are within
So the white tiger and the green dragon
that?
are the spiritual animals of the west tiger and east dragon. And so they're, in our terminology, they're vessels of meaning that contain that whole quarter of existence, where the other quarters are the red bird or the red phoenix and the turtle snake. And so the green dragon is east in growth, rising energy, new life energy, and west in tiger, the tiger coming down the mountain, usually in the images, is declining autumn, metal, energy. And in any given context, they might have more specific qualities, but those are the categories. Red phoenix, sun, south, turtle snake, water, north.
Think about, say anything about the yellow dragon and the five elements sort of connection with Earth, and are they sort of separate layers, or do they reinforce the idea of centrality in a sort of integrated way?
Yeah, the latter, I would say. The yellow dragon, or the qilin, which is a multi-animal composite, can be the spiritual animal or the vessel of meaning for center. And yeah, it's the place between. The center is also, from where we look, and it is from where we govern, self-govern. And so it carries ideas of both integration of the processes in each of the four directions, and also of intention with respect to those processes. Sometimes it's yellow dragon, sometimes it's qilin.
What does Lin mean?
I forget, it might mean beast or something. And it's a different chi.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I don't remember.
Is it possible to say more about in intention, and this sense of sort of intention as the go-between is obviously not the kind of intention that maybe one could also describe as sort of willfulness, but not the sort of intention with which I go about changing things in the everyday world that I'm engaged in.
So it has more to do with sincerity and faith, and faith, in the sense of, especially in the sense of trust, so that oriented toward the sacred with a clear commitment, drains of force that which pulls you out of center. And so through strength of sincerity, intention, trust, faith, that which is separate comes together. A push and a pull. Instead of each moving outward differently, return to balance each other in the center.
Sort of retains a sense of kind of steadfastness in a way.
It does.
A kind of like steadfast clarity. In some
Mhm.
sense.
So, you know, in our sort of narrative experience, that will feel forceful at first and then arrive at feeling like you're just allowing.
Interesting, there's the word kavanah in Hebrew. It's used a lot in talking about, and it's translated as intentions. Sincerity is probably as close a word as any to the same idea. If you act with intention, it seems to have a strong parallel.
Yep.
It's kind of like acting in alignment.
Yep.
I can see that's arising is more necessary at the transition points between elements in the year or in the day or something like that. But so is this shifting occurring and happening there. It's almost that there's this mediation occurring, but you could see that it would be a calling or an opportunity to recognize that change occurring at the most strong, really obvious point in some way.
I've always had that feeling when we work with colors. I think particularly when we were doing inner drumming of the yellow dragon kind of turning the wheel
Mhm.
and kind of stirring it, and it all became kind of like one of those. I mean, you could get lost in it and not, be a little trancing out, but not a kaleidoscope, or maybe it is a kaleidoscope where you spin around and all the colors kind of start to
Yep.
merge together. And
Yep.
be that yellow in the center.
Yep.
which I was having while we were meditating was of being on a train heading back to the station, and then there are all these 10,000 trains heading out of the station, and we're passing each other, and sort of like I'm on the train going, getting closer to the station, and it sort of seems ironic that we all started out in the station. And we're rushing off in our lives, and we have to work so hard. Find out what we started
In the
with.
meantime, they dismantled the rail.
Sometimes I hear somebody saying, without striving, we wouldn't have railroads or Twitter. Got me.
I saw this catchy phrase on this matcha tea in a can, and it said, what's the phrase? Something comes to those who wait.
Good things.
Good things. It says, good things come to those who hustle. Because it's matcha. It's like, whoa. Very good, very good one.
This is another version of tea drinking.
Yeah.
Not so much hustle.
Yeah.
Allow the hustle.
You're talking about Central Channel, and I started feeling curious about the Belt Channel and seeming sort of like electron layers, energy.
My
Are there
electron models aren't sufficiently fresh to corroborate that, but the belt channel equalizes the other channels. Equalizes the yin and yang.
Is the belt channel this energy that wraps around?
It's approximately at the navel and
Okay.
sort of elliptical around your energy fields. So everything that travels up and down is harmonized through the belt channel.
Is it also where you store and hold things? Is that
You can really start to this kind of unconscious like wave of things that you hold on to. I think that's what
Well, so that's Jeffrey Yuen's taken out.
it's more like
It's
psychological.
it's an extrapolation of understanding that I'm not sure that anybody else agrees with, but may be true, but it's a leap, and if you find it to be true, there it is. But it's not part of the traditional model, to my knowledge, that I've encountered.
You can understand that the past being present in your own body in more psychological ways that could just be little bundles stored in your brain, but sort of somehow there's that sense that when you're out walking, certain things move and come up, and it does feel like there's some embodied aspect to one's experience, like not just kind of hard brain body dualist.
Right?
I've also heard, I don't know if it was from that perspective, that the sort of could be chi or dantian is at the point of where the belt and the front and back sort of somewhat corresponds with that.
Sure.
I'm thinking about the little flies that stay right in front of your eyes when you're walking in the woods. I was going, do they stay with you or do they swap off with other flies as you?
It was the image of,
Yeah, that was the thought.
Yeah.
did they go into
Yeah,
your
just-
eyes, you're trying to walk forward?
Apparently it's the last of the 8 extraordinary vessels to form. The central channel forms first, but the channel.
In the development of
I think that's,
our bodies.
yeah. But again, that might be a version.
A lot of the old alchemical texts begin with an embryology summary, and I haven't translated one of those yet, but interested in parsing those details. Say, I think some leaps can be made quickly to our modern understanding in our English language, but certainly there are things to be learned from the embryological perspective. One of the old, so nice metaphors of restoring your jing is adding oil to the lamp. So we have practices like inverted breathing or more broad spectrum inclusive practices like the Yom rising and the full cycle or simply stillness in order to add oil to the lamp so that it may burn and transform perpetually.
Diana's in matcha mode. It's kind of like Hanukkah, which is there wasn't enough oil to last
Right. Right.
to burn in the temple in Jerusalem
Right.
for the duration of a trip to where the source of the oil was and back.
Right.
So it was a miracle. So you're actually, when you're up late and doing stuff on your second wind, it's a miracle.
This LED candle here is left on. It's in the place of an oil lamp. And so the reference is also to the oil lamp on your altar, which is meant to never go out. And is not